Welcome to Untold Physio Stories, a podcast that informs and educates by connecting you to rehab industry leaders who share their candid successes and failures in business and practice.
This episode of Untold Physio Stories is sponsored by Edge Mobility System. Edge Mobility System is your online site for everything a PT, OT, DC, MT, ATC, or fitness pro would need. Get certified in blood flow restriction therapy or training online. Check out our full modern manual therapy seminars, ISTM toolkit, Edge suspension trainer, portable tables, and more. Untold Physio Stories listeners can save 10% by going to edgemobsys.com. That's edgemobsys.com/untold to save 10% off their first purchase.
Edge Health and Tech Solutions. We do websites that work for you and give you an edge over the competition. Did you know that you have less than 10 seconds to capture someone's interest in your website before they click away? How about the fact that most people are accessing your website from their phone? Save thousands and get a fully mobile, appealing, and SEO-optimized website linked to your social media, email list, and Google My Business. All for one low price and no monthly fees. Why not keep doing what you do best in your business and allow us to handle the tech side? Let's get started. Find us at edgehealthandtech.com.
Welcome back to Untold Physio Stories. I'm one of your hosts, Dr. E, with Modern Manual Therapy, Edge Mobility System, and Modern Rehab Mastery, our 4-month online mentoring program. And my co-host is
Dr. Andrew Rothschild with Modern Patient Education.
We should just, I should just use that intro all the time so we don't have to say that over and over again. Who would know other than us? Anyway, have you ever had a patient who gets a scan or gets news from the doctor and you think it's going to be nocebo and it ends up being placebo?
Not very often. Maybe I've had one actually, probably it seems fairly recently, but before that, usually the opposite.
Yeah, it is usually the opposite. Normally when someone says they have a scan, I usually first caution them not to get a scan, and I tell them why, that, people who get a scan normally do worse when studied, 2 equal groups with the same non-specific neck or back pain. The group that doesn't get a scan and has the same kind of physical therapy, education, and exercise does not do as well typically as the group that does not get a scan. And, I explain to them, for you listeners who are not aware of this, that basically it's frustrating to get a scan, because if you have pain and you want answers and the scan is negative, then you don't get answers. But if you have pain and you have a positive scan for whatever the doctor says is bad looking on it, then all of a sudden your free avoidance and your kinesiophobia ramps up. So that is also bad.
Right.
In terms of outcomes. So anyway, I mean, this case is a little bit more than just a scan. So there was a patient who was referred to me for chronic pain. I thought initially, and I still think to this day, she was centrally sensitized, but the end result after 4 visits was much better than I expected. Her mechanism of injury was that she fell out of a boat in the water, and then trying to get on the metal edge of this boat, she kind of ended up balancing. She's a very thin woman. She ended up balancing on her right 12th rib for whatever reason, and she put almost all her body weight on her rib on that metal edge of a boat. Right. Yeah. So that was really painful. She also has a history of a rotator cuff tear and I believe a labral repair on that same right side. So she'd already been in rehab for that and kind of going through that. And that was going well until this rib. So after the rib, she ended up with a lot of right-sided lower quarter pain, not necessarily radiating into her SI or anything, but we'll get to that later. A lot of rib pain, difficulty breathing, extreme difficulty with trunk rotation, and a therapist who I've my wife used to work with, and then he's attended a couple he's attended a seminar that I taught. He was seeing her for a while, and she also is seeing a massage therapist and an osteopath and a chiropractor. Just one of those who, is trying to get as much relief as she can. She's extremely fit. She wants to work out, but she's unable to work out because of all her pain. So, the first thing I did after I was referred to this patient, and I trust the therapist who sent her to me, but he just said I reached the end of what I know to do with people, and he's just doing a lot of functional exercise and otherwise things that would normally help. Manual therapy. He's a good manual therapist. The things that she said helped her were the osteopathic adjustments and the muscle energy technique. And every time though, she said, well, I always feel better after this for her rotated ribs or her rotated pelvis. She said, well, isn't there anything I can do at home to help this or mimic what you do? And his simple answer was no. So that got me laughing, and also simultaneously upset me, because I said there's always something you can do. And a lot of what the first session was, and almost the first couple sessions, was quite a bit of deprogramming, because in the past she had gone to several PTs and chiropractors for chronic SI pain. Then she ended up with an SI fusion after tons and tons of prolotherapy that apparently, I don't know if it helped at all, but it definitely either stopped helping or only took her so far, to the point where she ended up with an SI fusion from a doctor who was out of state. Apparently that took care of all her SI problems. And, I had to read Greg Lehman's book, and I'm talking about how things don't go in and out of place. And I think I finally had to meet her halfway. Basically, in the first visit, the only thing I did was restore as much pain-free trunk rotation as possible. She didn't fit the cervical patterns. She was very limited and afraid to go into right trunk rotation, but just simple isometrics. Every time she kind of hit a barrier, I just did resisted isometrics at her scapula, just kind of pushing her to the left as she rotated to the right. That got her to full trunk rotation, and I practiced that with some breathing techniques. After only doing that, she said she was 70% better in terms of her persistence, and she had constant pain in almost all activities. She was about 70% better after about a week of doing that. That 70% she kind of held on for another 2 to 4 weeks, because I was only seeing her every other week. The next several visits, I really kind of worked on, just her feeling stable, the fact that her rib doesn't go in and out of place. After the first visit, all her diffuse pain was really localized at the posterior rib. So instead of doing, because I suggested taping just to kind of neuromodulate it, and she said she's already tried taping. So all I did was, when she was breathing or when she was rotating either anteriorly or posteriorly or doing rows, which she felt that same kind of local rib pain now at the costochondral junction, all I did was I pinched the skin. I just slacked it like you're just giving someone like a little pinch. And that took most of the pain away. That was easy enough technique for me to teach her. On the third visit, again, she's about 80% better now, really happy with her progress, back to working out. Some of the only pain she had was with breathing and deep inhales. And she was really fixated, as she was in all the visits, that her rib was out of place. So I palpated it, and I did feel like it was a little bit more posteriorly rotated. So for whatever reason, instead of just trying to talk her out of that again, because again, this is at least a month and a half now of me trying to talk to her, having her read the book several times, I just said, you know what, it is a little out of place. So I did a little trunk rotations and some resisted side bending. And for whatever reason, that made it feel like it was back into place for both of us. She felt it. I felt it. It was no longer prominent. She said she couldn't really replicate that. I tried to have her replicate the trunk rotations and resisting side bending into a chair or resisting with her arm bent on an armrest. Instead, she had her husband come in. I taught him how to do that. She repeated that for a week. Then she said her rib is no longer going out of place. And then she's had, several days. She can go at this point 2 or 3 days being completely pain-free. So she's never had intermittent pain before for as long as she's had this. And that's why I think she maybe wasn't centrally sensitized but she had some very strong maladaptive beliefs about her rib. And I think that if I hadn't met her halfway and said that her rib was out of place and then shown her way to put it back into place, like she always wanted from the osteopath, I don't think we'd be that we were today with the intermittent pain. And the last part, I think, and this wasn't really a scan, but she went back to the osteopath because on several visits, I basically had to get her to break up with these providers. The PT she was fine with, and he was fine with also, because he even said, you need to just see Urson. The osteopath, she kept on saying, oh, I have a visit. I have an MRI coming up. I have an osteopath coming up. And I said, well, the MRI, let's just wait on that because you're doing so well, right? I would have recommended the MRI again, which would have been, I don't know, our second or third MRI at this point, if we wouldn't have gotten anywhere. But, you're 70% after one visit, and now you have intermittent pain. The osteopath, she basically said, yeah, even my husband doesn't like it when I go to this guy because he doesn't even give me anything other than temporary relief. So, she's just too nice to break up with any of these people. Cause I even said, you need to break up with these people. You're literally like stringing them along. I'm like, it's a professional thing. Like, they shouldn't get upset at you. But she said, well, just in case I need an injection, I just want to see him. And if he wants to do METs on me, that's fine. And I'm like, okay, I guess in case you need an injection in the future, even though literally the injections didn't get you anywhere, but she was just afraid, right? Afraid to cut the ties. So the last time she actually went to the osteopath, he always does a head to toe assessment according to her. And he said that her SI, her atlas was out of place and her ribs looked good today. But her SI was rotated and it's out of place. And she said, my SI can't, yeah, I know. And she got really upset. She's like, I got so upset because she said, my SI is fused. It can't be out of place. And he's like, oh, okay. Well, it still can be out of, even though she insisted, right? He's like, it still can be out of place. It's just millimeters.
Yeah.
And I just think to myself, even though we all have learned this in manual therapy school, when has millimeters ever really made a difference? In some, we're taught that, right? Like 2 millimeters of gapping in L5S1 is bad when it's compared to 1 millimeter of gapping in L4, L5, right?
Right.
But the SI, as we know, even before fusion, according to research, it's pretty much fused in your late teenage years.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know when millimeters make a difference, but it wasn't this time. So I think she broke up with the osteopath, long story short.
Well, that's good. Just even just for the other stuff too. I mean,
right. To be fed the maladaptive beliefs as well.
Yeah. The atlas out of place. That's very traumatic. If your atlas is out of place, you're going to be a quadriplegic.
Yeah, I know for sure. I mean, she's doing really well.
Yeah. But you could tell that's amazing because you're doing so well. You're walking and everything.
Right. I just real quick though, I did see a colleague of mine saw a patient who's in a bad MVA, and they said every time I look up, my head falls off, and then I pass out, and when I wake up, I have to put my head back on.
Dens fracture.
Yeah, and that's what it was to them. So they actually had some sort of dens fracture or burst fracture or something like that, and they were just so unstable that they passed out. And then I don't know what position her head was in when they woke up, but apparently they had to reset everything. And then, they were referred for surgery. I
mean, that's scary. It's lucky she didn't die, honestly.
I know. Well, usually people who are that unstable, they don't move actively or passively. Like the few that I've seen, and this is an aside. If you guys have never seen, if you're always wondering, how will I know whether someone has upper cervical instability? You'll know.
Yeah.
Because you won't be able to do anything to them. And they're typically so hypomobile, so afraid to move, so unable to move, whether it's weight bearing or non-weight bearing, that you'll know in the presence of trauma that, you have no business treating this patient.
Yeah. Ooh, speaking of trauma.
Speaking of trauma, hopefully no one has a dens fracture or worse with that.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, that's usually that's usually a sign of where the body's protective mechanisms are doing their job really, really effectively, because it's trying to tell them like this situation is not good.
Right. I don't know how this person actually got that far to the point where
Yeah.
they could look up and pass out, but I guess it's another like that, like almost like that threatless TMJ case I talked about. If you guys want to look that up, it's a great episode. All right, Andrew, where can people find you?
People can find me mostly on Instagram, sometimes Twitter at a Rothschild PT, and of course, modernpatienteducation.com.
All right, and Andrew's starting his new cohort this week, and so hopefully he'll get lots of great participation.
That's the truth.
All right, have a good day.
You too.
Well, you can find me, Dr. E, at Modern Rehab Mastery. That's our new online mentoring program. It includes modern manual therapy, modern patient education, and modern strength training. It's 3 months with 3 mentors, so 1 month with each mentor, 4 weeks, tons of modules, lots of CEUs, learn at your own pace for a month, then move on. So go beyond the seminar. You also get chat room with your mentees and mentors and live Q&As every week. Check out all my products, Edge Mobility System. We have the new Edge ISTM toolbox that includes the Edge Mobility Star and the OG Edge Mobility tool, our Edge Restriction System BFR cuffs. That's part of Dr. Kyle Coffey's Modern Strength Training BFR certificate. I hope to see you at a live eclectic approach course soon. That's modern manual therapy in US, Canada, and South America. And make sure to rate Untold Physio Stories 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. You could also subscribe on Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and Spotify. And as always, you guys have an awesome day.